Why China is more likely to support Russia than Ukraine. China's general approach to Russian sanctions in its neighboring regions has been to minimize its involvement. After Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, Beijing refused to recognize declarations of independence by the de facto states of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. For instance, today faced with a growing number of restrictions already imposed on Chinese firms by the US, Beijing may be more willing to provide an economic lifeline to Russia and President Putin's cronies in particular. China has tended to be highly critical of sanctions in general, and in particular those imposed by the US on Russia. Following the annexation of Crimea, Beijing offered political support to Moscow but acted with restraint when it came to the provision of economic relief for fear of Chinese companies being targeted by secondary sanctions. In Ukraine, there have been suggestions that China might help Russia behind the scenes, but it is as yet unclear how far China would go to assist Russia in this respect. While Ukraine is an important economic partner for China and a major supplier of agricultural goods, Beijing must have realized the barriers to its influence. Political relations have remained low-key since Ukraine's maiden revolution in 2014, which was regarded by the Chinese elite as yet another example of a Western-sponsored action. Ukraine has provided military technology to China that Russia was unwilling to sell. But the growing US influence in Kiev slowed down military technological cooperation between the two states. In 2014, after Russia annexed Crimea, the Chinese reaction was muted, with China abstaining on the condemnation of the annexation in the United Nations Security Council. However, China has not given any explicit recognition to Russia's incorporation of Crimea. Indeed, at the time, Beijing accused the West of double standards. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs took its time to formulate its position relating to Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Foreign Minister Wang Yi, speaking by phone with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, declared general support for sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries, adding that China recognizes the complex and special historical context of the Ukraine issue. The wording resembled Beijing's reaction to the annexation of Crimea, but in the current context, it can be interpreted as China's indirect support for Russia's use of military force. The fact that Russia doesn't have to worry about its eastern flank has also helped, as Moscow could move troops from the eastern military district to help with troop buildup around Ukraine. China is one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, with veto rights and responsibility for international peace and security. China is increasingly positioning itself as a global responsible power and taking a more active role in international affairs in keeping with its economic power. For example, it is participating in UN peacekeeping missions and urging mediation and diplomacy in international disputes. This image may become harder to maintain as the military conflict in Ukraine escalates. China will also be watching carefully for the United States' response. Some suggest this may be a proxy for how the US might react to any Chinese action over Taiwan. But the two situations should not be conflated as they have their own dynamics. Washington's commitment to Taiwan's defense is stronger than to Ukraine's. The deteriorating Sino-American relationship is the main factor in Beijing's implicit approval of Russia's attack against Ukraine. Back in 2014, China was deepening its political and economic engagement with the US and the European Union. Beijing began building its own multilateral institutions, such as the Belt and Road Initiative and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, hoping to gradually gain more say in the international order. Peaceful unification with Taiwan, ruled by the Kuomintang, a Taiwanese political party, looked feasible. But today, China and the US clash in a number of fields, from the South China Sea to cyberspace and technology. Beijing has scaled down its outward investment. European states, in turn, have grown suspicious of Chinese intentions, with the US terming China an economic competitor and a systemic rival in some areas of the relationship.